We're just waiting for people to filter in. I think we'll get started. Good morning, Parry Sound, Muskoka, and welcome to MPP Norm Miller and MP Scott Aitchison's roundtable. My name is Kelly Haywood. I'm with the Huntsville Lake of Bays Chamber of Commerce, and I'll be your moderator today. I'd like to introduce and thank Dulcie Pascoe from the Almaguin Chamber of Commerce for supporting and helping us along with this excellent roundtable. And I appreciate your time, Norm and Scott, very much for agreeing to chat with our business community today. So just a couple of points. If you have questions that you didn't have the opportunity to ask, you're welcome to ask them in the chat box. We'll do our best to get to those questions, but we did get a number of questions in advance. So I will start, though, with, again, introducing our MP, Scott Aitchison, and invite you to say a few words.
Well, I would just say thank you to the Chamber and to our many businesses that have joined. It's great to do this, and we hope to try to answer some questions and get some information out there. It's a great opportunity to connect, and I'm looking forward to getting to the questions.
Thank you. And our MPP, Norm Miller. Good morning.
Good morning, Kelly, and thank you for hosting this, being the moderator, and Lucy as well for participating. And I'd like to first of all just congratulate all the businesses in Parry Sound, Muskoka, because we've done very well through COVID, and that's because businesses have been putting the protocols in place and following them. So we've had very few outbreaks. So let's keep it up so that we don't end up like Ottawa, Peel, and Toronto. But you know, I'm very happy with the way it's gone so far. And thank you, Scott, for joining us. Scott's in a hotel in British Columbia earlier in the day than we are, because on a family health-related visit. So thanks, Scott, for doing this, and hopefully that hotel internet will survive through the next hour.
Excellent. All right, well, we'll get to some questions, and then we'll open it up if anyone has any others, as I indicated. So the first question is, what do you believe the current state of economic stability is? What developments could be expected in the small villages and towns across Muskoka, Nipissing, and Parry Sound regions? Start with Norm.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Kelly. You know, I think there's a lot of uncertainty out there right now for all of us, wondering how long COVID is going to be around. I'm sort of feeling that it's for the foreseeable future, really, until there's a vaccine, and we don't know when that will be happening. You know, I very much believe that the economy and jobs and is directly tied with health outcomes. And in our area, we've done very well. We've got a few hot spots in the province, but the province, when you compare it to the States, which has been much more open than we are, I mean, Scotiabank just did a study showing that we're having more jobs created in Ontario than the States is, where we've had tighter restrictions. So, you know, it's been an interesting time. There's been some businesses that have done really well through COVID. You know, things like golf courses, which back in the spring were worried about whether they were going to open. The times I played, just about every golf course in Parry Sound, Muskoka seemed to be full virtually all the time this year. So things like golf courses, marinas, which again were back in the spring were struggling to get open. I think they had a pretty darn good year. ATV sales, apparently it's hard to find an ATV. And you know, and I think there'll probably be other opportunities we haven't thought of with all the people that would normally go to Florida that will be sticking around. It might be, could be a great season for snowmobiling, for example, as these folks that would normally be in Florida are wondering what to do with their time, or curling clubs as well. And in terms of the villages, and I just got off the phone with the mayor of Parry Sound. I certainly see, lots of opportunity all the time. He was calling about a provincial issue, wanting to develop where the OPP station and the Ontario government offices are in Parry Sound, with an interested buyer to do some economic development there. And I think that's true around the riding. There's other similar things happening. The other thing, that has happened with COVID is and I'm sure there's questions about it, is it's made broadband and internet access a much higher profile issue, and it's gotten government's attention. And I'll pass it on to Scott.
Mr. Aitchison?
Easy on the mister there, Kelly. I would agree with what Norm has said. I think that there is a lot of uncertainty still. There's no question about that. And I think that both the federal and provincial governments have done a pretty good job of supporting business. There are a few gaps, and we, certainly at the federal level, we've raised those, and as a result, there have been a few changes to some of the programs, like the rent program. Tenants can now apply directly for that, as opposed to having to go through a landlord that may or may not be interested in it. But I also do agree that I think it presents a bit of an opportunity for the towns and villages of Parry Sound Muskoka. I think, if you look what's going on in the real estate market right now, as an example, I remember chatting with my colleagues at Coldwell Banker in the very early days of this pandemic, and they were all very concerned about whether the real estate market would be crushed by this whole situation. And of course, I suggested to them then that we may have a really good season, because there might be a lot of people looking to get out of the city and get up here sooner rather than later. In fact, that is what's transpired. Anyone I talk to in real estate in the Muskoka area anyhow tells me that they've had one of their best years ever. The market is hot because people are getting out of the city. They've recognized that they don't need to be there to work. They can do an awful lot of stuff online, and as a result of that, they've also become part of our vocal group that are suggesting that we need to have an awful lot better internet access in our area. It's an important service, and so I think that those voices being added to that call are important. So I see it as a bit uncertain, but I see it that there's still opportunities for us to capitalize on this and see some growth in our area, probably somewhat at the expense of the GTA.
Thank you, gentlemen. And if you may indulge me, I'd just like to add a little bit to that as well. Recently, we conducted a very significant survey, and the outcome of it, certainly recognizing that many businesses have suffered a great deal as a result of COVID-19. Some much more than others, and some, as Norm Miller indicated, have been quite successful as a result. Just looking forward, though, I think there's a huge opportunity, to Scott's point, particularly in the winter, where there's a huge cohort of individuals looking to get outside, looking to find things to do, particularly in the GTA area and even Northern Ontario. So for businesses listening, I think, developing winter activities and really utilizing and working with your local Chamber of Commerce. We are currently in the process of pulling together a very significant winter tourism marketing campaign. And that is our intention to reach much broader than Huntsville and Lake of Bays. It should include every business in Muskoka and Oneida Highlands. So reach out to us. We can help you. We can help market as packages. I think this is a time more than ever for us to be working collaboratively to really help, keep our area on the map and move it forward. So let's continue to work together on that piece. And we've seen great support both from the province and the federal government in terms of funding to help these activities happen. So watch for more, certainly from our chamber, and I hope we'll be able to pull more off and really position our area positively. So thank you.
If I can add to that, yeah, I mean, in the Huntsville area there, Arrowhead Skating Trail, it was popular before. They're going to have to be open all the time, 24 hours a day. If what's happened with other trails, I mean, on one of our earlier roundtables we did, there was kind of complaints about some of the trails being too busy, like the Hardy Lake Provincial Park Trail, for example. So I think there is definitely opportunity for more experiences outdoors that, especially, that will have a big demand for them. So.
I agree. Yeah, and we're working with our local municipality to do just that. And I would encourage all of you to do the same, because we need to think outside the box and find, new areas to play in. So it's good. All right, the next question is, what alternatives do we have other than loans in order to keep afloat? Many business areas in the Almaguin area, mostly involved with tourism, are greatly concerned about accruing debt that may never be repaid if we have another round of closures. And we'll start with Scott Aitchison, please.
Well, it's an important question, and I share the concern about debt for businesses, for individuals, for governments as well. We are accruing debt at a crazy rate. There's no question about that. I would say that at the federal level, most of the programs that the government has offered have been loans, but there also have been things like the wage subsidy, which are not a loan. The rent program is not a loan. And I know as well that there's been a significant amount of money added to the budget of FedNor to assist, and I don't think all of those are loans. If there is something specific that you need help with, though, please reach out to my office. Kirsten Baker is my constituency manager. She, as I say many times on these panels, is 100 times, 1,000 times smarter than I am, and deals with these issues and the bureaucracy very effectively and better than I do. And so if there's something specific that we can help with, we will try our best. And Kirsten is a whiz. So if there's something specific we can help with, please reach out.
Norm?
Yes, so the question said, it mentioned the Almaguin area, which for provincial programs is considered to be in Northern Ontario. So probably the most significant program for folks in the Almaguin area from the provincial government for businesses is the Northern Ontario Recovery Program. So that's come out relatively recently. I think applications are open now, and it's being run through the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund Corporation. And in terms of what is eligible, I'll just read it so I get it exactly right. Eligible projects will support the adaptation of business operations and practices to meet public health guidelines for operations under reopening stages and to support employee and consumer safety, and it counts things like capital construction, leasehold improvements, new or used equipment, restructuring of business operations, marketing, personal protective gear, and other. And there's a gray area for other costs. So, and it's $25,000. So it's significant. It's not a loan, it's a grant, and it's retroactive. So it's for any cost. So if you've spent the money, there's a lot of businesses will say, well, we don't have any to spend on these things, but if you already spent it in the spring so that you could operate through the summer, you are eligible to apply for it. And as Scott mentioned, Jess Farger-Lee has organized this, and she's on the call today, and I'm sure through her in our office, we'd be happy if you have any questions with it to apply. If you're not in the north and lucky enough to be in Almaguin, unfortunately that program is only for our northern residents. There are other programs, especially for really small sort of Main Street businesses. There's a whole Main Street recovery plan. So there's $60 million that's been made available. So it's a $1,000 grant for small businesses to offset costs to do with COVID. And it's for very small businesses, 2 to 9 employees. One of the other things that's been changed in this same sort of legislation that's going forward with that is, in the early stages of COVID, we allowed as a way for restaurants to survive, to allow them to sell alcohol in takeout. So we are now looking at making that permanent so that it will help restaurants. And there's also changes to make things more simple, including allowing 24/7 deliveries to restaurants. And in combination with the federal government, there's the Digital Main Street program, which is a $57 million program. And I think it's grants of $2,500 to assist businesses in creating an online presence, which is so much more becoming more important in COVID-19. And there's also a portal for small businesses, and that's at ontario.ca/smallbusinesses to get more information and to apply for those programs.
Thank you, Norm.
You're welcome.
I think I said at the beginning of our discussion too, if you had questions, to put them in chat, but there's also a Q&A button at the bottom, which would be easier for our staff to monitor. So if you have specific questions, please enter them into the Q&A button. So this question is for Norm Miller, and it is there a plan to prioritize flu shots to make them available and easy to access for workers who interact with many people on a daily basis, primarily tourism workers who do not have vehicles? Thank you.
Yes, and that's an excellent question. And I certainly would encourage everyone to get a flu shot this year. And I think people are heeding that advice. And, as a result, there's tremendous demand for flu shots. The province is purchasing some 700,000 more flu shots, including more of the high dose ones for the most vulnerable this year. So that's good. The bad news is there has been tremendous pickup. So if you are getting a flu shot, I think you might have to be a little patient. I know I was actually hoping to get one this week, and as was my wife, and found that wasn't available this week. So you might have to wait a few weeks, but until the pharmacies and health clinics receive more of the flu shot. But I certainly think that it's something we should all be doing to help so we don't confuse flu with COVID as we move through this, is one of the reasons. And so, there's lots of other reasons for your child to still be able to go to school, and you might have a sniffle versus having COVID-19. So I certainly would encourage everybody to get the flu shot, and just, you might have to be a little patient.
Thank you. All right. As we are approaching a shoulder season, and the businesses are going to be hit with a lot of what happened in April, as the summer was around the corner and businesses were able to handle the expenses. But as of now, after the Thanksgiving weekend, they are dying. Will there be any help to sustain the businesses as things are getting worse again? For example, help in property taxes, hydro, or any other provincial or federal help as in the past? Norm?
Sure. So the biggest thing that's happened recently from a provincial level is some $300 million that's meant for the worst hit businesses. So it's primarily directed towards the areas that have moved kind of back into stage 2, which is Ottawa, Peel, and Toronto. And it's meant to cover things like basically your fixed costs. So all hydro, or up 90% of hydro, I believe it is, gas or propane, property tax, but primarily for those areas. However, we have some businesses in our area that effectively have been totally shut down. So, and what I've been told is they should have access to that money as well. And I'm thinking of summer camps, for example, which, we probably have more camps in Parry Sound Muskoka, at least 50, I would say, than any area of the province. So I'm hopeful that businesses like that have effectively been shut down should be able to access support through that. And as well, of course, I did already mention for the businesses that are in Parry Sound District, there's the Northern Ontario Recovery Plan, which is a grant for costs available with associated with COVID of $25,000.
Thank you, Norm. Scott?
Kate Monk has actually asked a question in the chat about whether if businesses qualify under the federal CEBA program, they're not eligible to apply for the new Northern Ontario program. I'm not sure of, Norm. Maybe you might want to speak to that quickly first. Yeah,
I believe that it's in addition to other programs. So so it comes last essentially. So if you qualify for some other federal program, then that does affect the NORP program. Let's see if I can find the exact information.
Okay. So the only thing I would add to what Norm has pointed out in terms of the provincial stuff is that the federal government, the changes they made to the rent program are a big one. I guess that will continue to be in place. The wage subsidy has been extended to the end of November, and I suspect that they will extend it even further. I may not agree with exactly how they've executed everything, but the government federally has certainly demonstrated that they're prepared to do whatever it takes to support business and to support Canadians. So, I'm a little worried about the debt levels, but they don't seem to be. And I know that, if we hear more specific cases and situations, we'll share that information and we'll make sure that the government responds accordingly.
So Scott, I'll just add that applicants must demonstrate that the amount requested from the NOHFC is incremental and does not duplicate other supports received. So can't duplicate. And the application window is from October 1st to December 31st.
All right. And I did notice that Kristen, I think it was, wrote in the chat their contact information for both offices. So if you want some further details on that, certainly reach out because they're such incredible resources. A next question. Something that's on everyone's mind is rural broadband access, as you indicated earlier, Norm. We all know that there are large pockets of underserved areas in the riding, often right outside the town limits or a few kilometers off the highway. Often the only types of internet available in these areas are the most expensive options in the market. Given the pandemic, these services are more necessary than ever. What are you doing and planning regarding rural broadband by funding and supporting infrastructures such as towers? Scott?
Yeah, happy to speak to this one. It's probably the issue that I'm spending the most time on right now. I raise it regularly in the House of Commons, and I speak, actually, it's one of those issues that I'm able to get the attention of cabinet ministers on. The government has made a lot of promises over the last 5 years, and I think that it's very clear to them now that their lack of delivery on a comprehensive solution to internet and broadband connections for rural Canadians is more apparent than ever, and it's more apparent than ever now that this is an essential service. So they seem to be moving, and I'll give you one example. Lakeland in our area actually had a really comprehensive proposal to dramatically expand broadband access across huge swaths of Parry Sound, Muskoka. It was some $30 million project that they were looking for support from the federal government, in the amount of about a small portion of that. Most of it they were going to fund themselves. And so for a very small investment from the federal government, thousands of homes would have had better internet connection as a result of this proposal. They sent that back in April and it was ignored. I raised the issue again in the House a couple of weeks ago, and then I actually just forwarded the proposal again directly to Minister Mosseff's personal private email address, and I got a response. She responded directly saying, "This is a really interesting idea." Her office called later that day, and we had a meeting arranged between her two people from her office with Lakeland the next day. So I feel like we're making progress, but we can't let up the pressure. We need a comprehensive strategy to deliver what is today's modern infrastructure. This is as important as roads and bridges, water and sewer, and it's the kind of thing that I think that Canada used to be a real leader in communications technology, and it's embarrassing that you can drive this country along the Trans-Canada and there are huge swaths of it where you don't have cell coverage, and we live in a modern society where our internet access in a lot of parts of Parry Sound, Muskoka, you may have access, but it's so outrageously expensive you can't afford to connect. So it's about accessibility, it's about reliability, but it's also about affordability. I continue to push. I continue to push in a respectful way. I feel like that's a bit more likely to deliver some success than just to be partisan critical and all that kind of stuff. So I think we're making some progress, but it won't happen soon enough, but we'll continue to work.
All right, thank you. Norm?
Yeah, and I think one of the positives of COVID it's really, everyone always said that broadband and internet improvements was important, but I think it's made us really realize that it's, as Scott said, an essential service and caught the attention of governments for, families trying to study at home and folks that are used to go to the office that are now their office is their home. it's really made it an important issue. Provincially, we used to have programs that would fund for the north the expensive cellular connections through subsidies. I think we're moving more towards through the Icon program with the $150 million from that towards solutions like fixed wireless and improving the fiber backbone that can really through the fixed wireless reach our more remote areas. And certainly, we're in the process of getting lots of applications. As Scott mentioned, Lakeland has an application that's moved to stage 2 in the Icon process, and I received a letter from them saying that it would connect, I believe it was 6,500 homes and businesses around the area. So that's a lot, and that's just one application. There's other applications from ExploreNet that has a proposal to build a lot of larger and smaller towers to make more connections. And there's some municipal projects as well that have been put forward. So there is work happening. I think it takes a while, but it certainly is the attention of governments, and I'm glad to see that we're making tangible progress on the ground to improve things because it is so essential.
Yeah, and again, I'll add, if I may, just the Muskoka Economic Recovery Task Force, specifically in Muskoka, is working very hard too on broadband. It's become a significant piece of what we're focusing on, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to do a really thorough analysis of what the needs are, and please watch for that so that we can get as much input as possible, and certainly from the surrounding area. I know everyone's impacted, so I think there's a great deal of awareness, and I'm very hopeful that it will improve. So thank you for your efforts on that, both of you. It's super important for our business community. The next question is, given that buildings contribute over 40% of the carbon causing climate change, and a large part of this is from the choice of materials, what is the province doing regarding the impact of carbon in buildings in order to combat climate change? We'll start with Norm.
Thank you, and that's a very good question, and I certainly believe that wood is the best choice from the perspective of carbon sequestering, and that's good for our area, and it's good for the province, and the province is certainly very supportive of the forestry sector. And there's some pretty innovative new projects that are going ahead, even in the cities, and some of the really big buildings that would be all concrete in the past, with technologies like cross-laminated timber, mass timber. I know not in our province, but out in British Columbia, the University of British Columbia built an 18-story wood building, and in downtown Toronto, there's some pretty, I believe there are at least 10 or 12-story buildings being built as we speak. So I think supporting the forestry sector, building a lot more with wood is a real positive in terms of climate change, and frankly, an economy in Parry Sound, Muskoka, and Ontario that relies on forestry as well.
Thank you. Scott?
Yeah, I would just add that to me, this is one of those areas where it makes a lot of sense for government to be involved and to assist Canadians in reducing their footprint. It's one of the reasons during the campaign I continue to say I'm not a big fan of the carbon tax because it just punishes Canadians, whereas a program to help people retrofit their homes to make them more energy efficient and reduce their energy costs is a great way of helping Canadians reduce. In the throne speech, there was a brief mention of such kind of programs again. We haven't seen any details yet, but I continue to watch for what they come up with, and hopefully it'll be a substantive program because it will help Canadians not just reduce their footprint, but improve their energy costs. And it's also it's good for the economy. It keeps Canadians working as they work on those retrofits. So.
And provincially, we can do things like change building codes to allow for some of these taller structures. For example, it used to be you could only build up to 5 stories in wood. I believe it's at least 6 stories now, and you can get special permits to build higher than that. And wood is good.
Thank you. All right, question number 7 is, This is not completely business related, but I hope it will still be addressed. So a different kind of angle. I don't feel that either the provincial or federal governments are doing enough to protect smaller communities from the influx of seasonal residents and tourists. Not only do they increase our health risk, but they also affect our internet and cell service, which impacts both businesses and homes. Those without vehicles are unable to purchase groceries after shelves have been emptied in small stores. What are your solutions for this problem, Norm?
Thank you. Well, and with all due respect, for people that hold this sentiment, I don't believe impeding people's freedom is the way to go. I think in Parry Sound Muskoka, we've shown through a very busy summer that even where we had cases in the community, like happened at Deerhurst, the protocols worked, and we stayed safe, and we've had relatively few COVID cases in Parry Sound Muskoka, despite having had a busy summer with lots of people looking to get out of the city. I see a lot of the positives. With regard to broadband, for example, we have more year-round residents that are seasonal residents that are staying year-round. That's more demand for broadband. It's more people paying for the service. So it's a route to funding improvements. And I see positives for people that are staying year-round, buying things locally and supporting businesses and being a positive in our economy. So, I actually see more positive than negative.
Thank you, Norm. Scott?
I agree with everything Norm said. I've never entirely understood the people that are, complain about tourists and cottagers and people visiting the area and spending money and using services. I honestly don't get that. I think it's a good thing, and I think that the more demand there is on our services, the more likely we are to get them improved. And this is just another example of it. So I fundamentally disagree with the premise of the question in the first place.
So if I could just add also, I think there's, concerns from a lot of locals in this regard. And I tend to agree that, tourism is the backbone of certainly our area. I think there's some good news stories that have come of it as well. When you look at groups like the Muskoka North Good Food Co-op and a lot of our local producers, I think it's time for us to broaden our horizons and really work hard at finding, different ways and finding ways to support your local economy. Again, we reach out to your local Chamber of Commerce. If you're struggling with, finding the right fit for your needs, we can help you. But there's an incredible movement as a result of COVID-19 with a lot of local produce, a lot of local agriculture, and incredible things that people are doing, inside their facilities. So,
and this is a good opportunity for Scott to promote our Support Local program. Yeah. Scott, pass it on to you.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to do that, but I guess the one other thing I would say, and it just occurred to me, and I realized maybe my responses sounded a bit callous, but when I read that question, I recognize too that it appears as though part of the question is related to an influx of people coming in during the pandemic and the fears that they may actually be spreading it, and I want to address that specifically because I think it's also important to point out that, in the early days of this, when everyone was calling for cottagers to not come to their cottage, a lot of cottages were already at their cottages, but what they were doing was isolating, as the guidelines suggested they should do. I want to caution people who see seasonal residents as some as people that don't necessarily belong to our community. They are a part of our community. Our community is made up of in large part these two distinct groups, but we coexist, and honestly, they are an important part of our social, cultural, and economic fabric. And I think that with people that come to their cottages or people coming to visit, if they follow the protocols and if they follow the guidelines that the province has laid out, then We should be safe. And I think that it's important to point out that the vast majority of cottagers did exactly that. People were telling them not to come, but they were already there, but you didn't know it because they were hiding out at their cottages and isolating in a much safer place than downtown Toronto. So I think I get that there's fear, but don't let that fear consume you and make you bitter about your neighbor, because these are our neighbors. We all, we all love the place that we live in, and if we all follow those guidelines, we'll all be safe.
And if I can add on to that, Scott, you didn't do the promote local campaign, but I'll try to remember to do that at the end. But yeah, I mean, that was a perfect example where we live just north of Parry Sound. Our neighbors who have a condo in downtown Toronto, immediately upon COVID happening, came up to what would be their cottage, and they're still there. And we hardly saw them for the first month. I think we went and visited to make sure they were okay, and if there was anything we could help with shopping or et cetera. But they, they're in their 80s. She was recovering from cancer, and frankly, I'd way rather be at their cottage versus it being riding an elevator in downtown Toronto. And they've, stayed safe, and they're still there. And I think they're planning on staying the winter. So, and I would do so if I was them versus going to Toronto to a hot spot.
Thank you. All right, so next question. I'm really interested to know how the youth in our community are doing. Have we seen an increase in depression, et cetera, with so many changes and limitations? I'd heard that depression and suicide and domestic violence was concerning. Have we seen that in our community, and is there a way we can help? I'll start with you, Norm, please.
Yeah, I believe we have, yes. So the provincial government is putting a big emphasis on increasing mental health supports. Even in the Main Street program for businesses, there's a mental health component, but there's also increased mental health funding for post-secondary students, for example. So the province is investing $19.25 million into mental health supports for post-secondary students, and that's an increase over last year. And there's a number of different programs that are geared towards that. But yeah, I think with COVID, it's isolated a lot of people. It's kept people in some parts of the province away from gyms, things that would normally improve their mental health, or from doing activities, social activities and social circles that are good for mental health. So I think it has definitely been a problem. And, you have kids at home that are used to going and socializing at school through the spring, thank goodness they're back and now, but months in the home with mom and dad is not seeing their friends, and you certainly get issues from that.
Thank you. Scott, do you have anything to add to that?
I don't really have a lot to add other than I totally agree with what Norm's comments on what the province is doing regarding mental health. I guess I want to say that we spent a lot of time on these roundtables talking about the very the very obvious issues that we're facing with business and struggling to pay the rent, decline in revenues, all those kinds of challenges. But I'm quite certain that we won't know really the full impacts of COVID-19 for some time. The impacts on people's mental health and the increase, the dramatic increase in calls to service for, domestic abuse. Honestly, this is a significant issue. I think the mental health system in our country has been in crisis for some time, and this is making it worse. So I am really pleased that the provincial government is stepping up and adding more resources. Again, I guess, the federal government does have a role to play, I think, in ensuring that the provinces have the sufficient funds they need, but we need a national mental health strategy. And I would just have to say again that, we are in this together. We need to look out for each other, and for people who are struggling, it's okay to struggle, and it's important to reach out, and it's important for us to support each other. We don't know the full impacts of COVID-19 yet. I suspect that we're going to see more and more of these issues, and we need to do everything we can to support people that are struggling.
Thank you, Scott. I agree concurrently. All right. Has there been any discussion at the federal or provincial level to resolve the labor shortage in this area, helping to eliminate barriers or speed up the processes to activate foreign labor markets? And second to that, making accessible or incentivizing housing for this purpose? Who wants to begin? Yeah, Scott, go ahead.
I did. Sorry, the business. I was sort of answering that question on the question and answer portion.
Yeah, I saw that. I think it's a good question for everyone to hear, if that's okay.
It's a very, very good question. So a couple of things I need to say. Number one is like the Foreign Workers Program is a program that has certain benchmarks that you can't really bring people in to the country to work in your industry or your business, and it's sort of predicated in part on what unemployment rates are in your area. We found, of course, that in tourism areas like ours, certainly in the agricultural community and in farming communities, that model hasn't worked during COVID-19, because although there may be people who are unemployed and not working, they don't have the skills necessarily to work in some of these sectors, or they're not interested in working in some of these sectors because they can make more money staying at home. So trying to get people to work has to be a challenge for a lot of businesses. So we certainly raise these issues with the government, and I would say that, pardon me, there hasn't been broad-based policy changes to these programs, but there have been specific cases where we've been able to assist, by working around policy. So I would say to businesses that are struggling with this, reach out to my office. We can try to help with specific cases when you're trying to, we're trying to navigate these bureaucracies. And when it comes to the housing issue that was raised as well, again, the federal government has made a lot of commitments, a lot of promises, but not a lot of action. I continue to raise the issue of housing and remind the government, which is populated by MPs from big cities, that housing is not just an issue in Toronto, that it is an issue in rural communities, and particularly communities like ours that are seeing a huge influx of people, and the market being really, really hot. It's tougher and tougher for people to find housing, to buy a house, to rent a place. Airbnbs and those kinds of things have added to that challenge. And so I'm pleased to see that municipalities are playing a bit of a role in ensuring that, Airbnbs are run a little more effectively and ensure that they're not consuming the entire market. But we need to make sure that we get our fair share of any, investments and incentives to the private sector to get more rental housing built. So I continue to raise those issues. I continue to push for us to get our fair share as well. And of course, that requires constant collaboration with the province and the District of Muskoka and the local municipalities, which we continue to do as well.
Thank you, Scott. Norm, do you have anything to add?
Well, just, of course, the Foreign Workers Program is federal, but there is the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program. And recently, just in this month, Ontario nominated a couple of different types of nurses and also foreign entrepreneurs. In terms of the workforce in general, provincially, what we're really focusing on is skills development and trying to encourage more youth to go into apprenticeships. So we've just been bringing out more supports, like some of the costs involved with apprenticeships. And I know Minister Monty McNaughton's working on a number of different programs. I was up with him in Sudbury a few weeks ago, where he was announcing some specific programs to help with skills development. So that's been a huge focus of the provincial government, trying to get more of our youth looking at the trades, that could be a truck driver or electrician or a welder or many other things, as being a really positive career that you can make lots of money at and have a good lifestyle. I would say, as related to the federal programs, some of them have been a bit of a disincentive for people going back to work. So, I think when CERB came out, there was thought of, it was designed to get money to people quickly, but there wasn't maybe a lot of thought put to the disincentive it created for, as things started to open up again, getting folks to get back and do their job. So.
Thank you. Norm, is there any timeline on when tradespeople can get back to writing their exams?
That I'm not sure, but I'm happy to try to find that out.
Yeah, okay. Right. The next question, with COVID-19, how do we get the federal and provincial government to acknowledge and support different commercial vehicle configuration permits across this province and country? I have a truck that was legally sold in Alberta and brought it into Ontario. My special vehicle configuration permit from the province of Ontario expires next year, yet this same truck was and still is legal in Alberta. We'll start with you, Norm.
Good. I think I know who is asking this question. It sounds like the sort of thing that we should be able to change to make it easier to do business, and that's something that we're working on as a government. So I'm on a committee that's the name for it is the Future State Modernization, and it's all about trying to make rules make more sense and reduce red tape for business, so it's just easier to do business in the province of Ontario. So this is a fairly specific sort of thing, and I'm no experts on the trucks, but if it's ideally the rules would be the same across the country and not different in Alberta and Ontario. So it's something I'm certainly happy to work on, and it might be something that would be perfect for this initiative, this Future State Modernization Initiative. And I would encourage other businesses, if you have things you have to do for government in particular that you just say, this doesn't make sense, or why do I have to do this? I got sent one last week from a golf, some $500 registration fee, and the owner said, this does nothing. And they had, the same golf course had submitted some suggestions last spring when we had a round table, and we were able to act on them. And I mentioned in another one of these meetings, a marina last spring brought up the fact that they had to register license plates if they go to deliver a boat, and they were getting fined by MTO, large fines. So they, to the point where they wouldn't even put their name of the marina on their truck because they'd be worried about getting pulled over by MTO. But we actually were able to deal with that. So now there's a dealer plate for marinas, so they can put the dealer plate on, deliver the boat, and not get fined by MTO. And that was from last spring through this summer that we were able to make that change. So there's lots of other examples out there, I'm sure, that the business folks that deal with them would think of. So I would encourage you to make my office aware of them, send an email to me, and we will certainly do our best to try to deal with it if possible.
Thank you. Scott, did you want to add anything to that? No, yeah, it's fairly provincial focus.
Sure, it is a provincial issue, but I guess maybe I would just quickly add, though, that I think it's important for people to remember that that the provinces are actually not subservient to the federal government. It's not like the levels of government are one works for the other. In our system of confederation, in fact, the provincial governments and the federal government are partners, and the Constitution lays out what responsibilities each of them has. And where the federal government interferes in provincial responsibility, you may have noticed over the past that every time they do it, they usually buy their way in. So they invest money. So things like healthcare, for example, it's a provincial responsibility. And of course, the way we've got this sort of National Healthcare Act is the federal government transfers significant monies with strings attached. So on issues like this, these are distinctly provincial responsibilities for the federal government to get involved, and even to help mediate or negotiate something that seems really quite simple like this. I get it. This is a dumb thing where, it seems odd that we have different regulations in different provinces like this. That it really is something for the provinces to work out amongst themselves. For the government to get involved in something like this, they tend to focus on the bigger, broader social questions. So.
Well, Scott, on that same topic, it was interesting. I watched the national news last night, and the discussion on the political panel was about the federal government coming up with plans for long-term care. And basically the consensus of all the three pundits that were on was that it's a provincial responsibility and province has the expertise. So we're not really quite sure why the federal government is getting involved with this. So that was on that same.
Well, and we're getting on a bit of a tangent, but I completely agree with you, Norm. I mean, this is one of those areas where I think Canadians are calling for some national standards on long-term care. And I think Canadians are absolutely justified in that. There's no question that COVID-19 has demonstrated very clearly to Canadians some of the significant problems we have with long-term care. But again, it is a provincial responsibility, and for the federal government to be involved, it has to be done through a negotiation with the provinces. We can't just impose rules on provincial government. So again, I think there's a role for the federal government to play in working together and working with provinces. But in any circumstances like this in the past, it's always, it always usually comes with the federal government contributing money to help the provinces do what they need to do. It's actually a flaw in Confederation, I think. The federal government has the vast majority of taxation powers, and yet the provinces are the ones that deliver the real services to people. I digress.
This is the, thank you. I was going to suggest perhaps that we have a session just about that, but back to Mr. Cooper's question, I definitely empathize with his situation. I know he's had a lot of struggles, and I know, Norm, you're very focused on, eliminating red tape. And I think as, a team together today, we will do our best to support and help these types of issues. So I'll follow up as well, and hopefully we'll be able to lend a hand in supporting his business and many businesses that bring such amazing high-paying jobs and unique solutions. So not one that we'll brush aside for sure. A fairly specific question for you, Norm. Can you help move skiing into an approved activity for stage 2 restrictions? So, important winter activity question.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. In Muskoka at this and Perry Sound at this time, we're not in stage 2.
Right.
The stage 2 restrictions are just in the hot spots based on the health outcomes. So Peel, Toronto, and Ottawa are where there are more restrictions, mainly to do with indoor dining and theaters and gyms and that kind of thing. So I wouldn't anticipate there being, I'm sure there's going to be protocols for skiing, and I assume they could mean cross-country skiing or downhill skiing. I would think downhill skiing should be one of those businesses that it should be a good opportunity this year. I enjoy going downhill skiing with our grandkids, and I would say the biggest challenge they would have in terms of COVID is the chalets tend to be pretty busy places at lunchtime, especially where people are bringing their own lunches, etc. So figuring out how to deal with that would be a challenge. But outside, you're separated, and if it's a cold day, you're going to have a mask on naturally anyways. So I would think it should be, an activity that could be encouraged and should be able to be done safely. And same with cross-country skiing. There's lots of opportunity to maintain distances and stay safe, and it's outside. So I would anticipate those activities should have a good year despite what's happening with COVID.
Yeah, I hope so. And I think too, it may be decided by zone, by area, but definitely skiing will be a popular thing to do this winter, I'm sure.
And someone's put on chat, I believe all ski clubs have come up with outdoor plans already to address the indoor chalet issue. Well, I'm glad to hear that. That's good.
Yes, excellent.
I hope to go skiing this winter as well.
Yeah. Norm, actually, you know what? I'm going to ask a question. You sort of mentioned indoor dining, so it's a good segue. Will the Ontario government come out with plans to close, or should that be an issue, to close indoor dining in Muskoka as we see cases rising in our health unit? We'd really like to be prepared if a shutdown is coming this time and not be caught with thousands of dollars in inventory.
Yeah, so I think we're doing really well right now. So if you just follow that go on the website every day and look at the areas, it's a pretty good guide to where restrictions might be coming. But Parry Sound and Muskoka has done really well, and we need to all keep doing those simple things that, the protocols, the wearing a face mask inside, physical distancing, washing your hands. That has been working. So I'd be very, very, very disappointed if we move back into stage 2 in our area. So I think it's up to all of us to make sure we don't. And right now it's Ottawa, Peel, Toronto. I think in York, based on the news conference I watched yesterday, it's teetering on the edge of moving back into stage 2. I think they had over 100 cases there yesterday. But we're Parry Sound Muskoka is doing really well, so let's just keep doing really well.
Indeed. We'll get as much notice as possible, I'm sure, hopefully. Sorry, Norm, you're on the hot seat a bit, but has any progress been made in moving the provincial boundaries so that Muskoka is considered to be in Northern Ontario? A conversation we've been having for a long time. Aligning with the federal definition of north-south, and therefore eligible for Northern Ontario tax benefits and incentives?
No, would be my response. And I'm glad to see that Muskoka is at least in Eastern Ontario for provincial programs now. So it's somewhere, because there was a time, and I think Scott and Mayor Smith and Bracebridge were certainly pointing out that it was the hole in the donut. And, there were programs to support all around us, but not in Muskoka. So that was remedied a couple of years ago. So we are now in the Eastern Ontario Development Corporation, which has various programs that are available for people of Muskoka. So I'm pleased that has happened, and we're not just no man's land.
All right. What is the status of the Northern Ontario transportation policy? And further to that, what stage is the Ministry of Transportation at with the with Ontario Northland Metrolinx business plan to resume passenger train service Toronto to Cochrane?
That would be for me, I would assume. I don't know the exact status of it at this time, and I suspect that COVID's probably thrown a bit of a wrench into plans that were in the works, but I'm happy to try to get an update on that, because I actually don't know the current status.
Okay. I mean, yeah, I think passenger service, obviously, by train would be something to have back, and I know we all know how hard that group works to make that happen.
I can,
Absolutely.
if I can add to that,
Yes,
I've actually had a couple of conversations with Anthony Rhoda, who's the Liberal Member of Parliament for Nipissing-Timiskaming, and he's the Speaker of the House right now, and also the NDP member for the Timmins James Bay, which is Charlie Angus. All three of us are committed to doing what we can to help at the federal level to get that passenger rail service going again. Charlie pointed out that it's important to all of us, but he thinks it's most important to him in his riding. So that's three different parties all working together and agreeing that we need to get that back up and running, and whatever we've got to try to do at the federal level to assist the province to make it.
And I know our member from Nipissing, our economic development member, Vic Fideli's been very supportive and has stated that we want to bring passenger rail back. My only concern would be at this point whether the finances of the provinces throws a wrench into the whole thing with all that's happened with COVID.
thank you. We're going to wrap soon, so if you have other questions to put in the Q&A, please do so. We talked a lot about broadband today, and we all know that's been an issue, and I've heard from both of you, and I know locally we're doing a lot to tackle that. But this is an interesting one as well, is cellular service seems to be particularly poor this summer. Can the province and/or federal government do something to request improvements from large telecom carriers? Scott, do you want to take that?
Happy to start with this one. And the answer is yes, and I would say that we're doing that, and I'm it's probably one of the biggest issues I focus my time and energy on. but it's it's rural broadband and cellular coverage are both they're linked and they're huge issues, and of course the cellular coverage issue is a little bit different in that the private sector companies that deliver those services, um, they hear pretty loudly from their clients, and they're expanding that cellular coverage and the capacity of that coverage. Broadband is a little bit tougher because, of course, I think the capital outlay for improvements to that system are bigger, and it requires some government assistance to make these projects financially viable. And of course, but they are linked, and I continue to push to make sure that they recognize the gaps that exist. Not just in Perry Sound Muskoka, but literally all across the north.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to that. Norm, did you want to add anything to cellular?
No, but I see a comment in the chat that makes a lot of sense. Perhaps you can convince the providers to share towers. Rogers works in the same areas as Bell and other areas. Neither works across the district. Good suggestion.
Thank you. I'm not looking at the chat, so I appreciate that. And finally, I think this is a kind of an interesting way to wrap. The question is, no question the federal government has thrown, and the provincial, a lot of money at COVID-19, but the question nobody's asking is how on earth are we ever going to repay so much debt? Scott, do you want to start with that?
I do. I'm sorry, I was typing another comment in there. I completely 100% agree with this issue and the concern is that's being raised. I've been concerned about debt levels, in our country for some time now, and not just federal and provincial and municipal debt, but personal debt, family debt as well. I would say generally that what's happening right now is not sustainable for sure. And one of the things that our party has continued to call for is a plan for how we recover financially and get out of the debt hole that we're in post COVID-19. Completely 100 and 1,000% support the efforts that have been made to support Canadians and sustain our economy, but we have to have a plan for what we're going to do to get out of it. I would say that right now the vast majority of federal government debt is effectively printing new money. So the Bank of Canada owns most of that debt. Generally speaking, when you print more of your currency, it can devalue that currency on the world markets and make products that you need to buy in your country a lot more expensive because you got to buy in American dollars. The one saving grace here is that most central banks are doing the exact same thing, and so it's reasonably balanced out. But that will come to an end, and interest rates will start to creep up. I suspect in a few years, and it will make the repayment of that debt more expensive. Right now, our debt servicing costs are slightly lower than they were in a couple of years ago, even though we've dramatically increased our debt. But that won't last forever, and we need to have a plan for how we're going to deal with that, because every dollar of debt servicing, every dollar you spend on paying interest on debt is a dollar you're not spending on services that Canadians need. So we need to see a plan. We need to know when we're going to get out of deficit and how we're going to pay it back. I completely agree. It's something that I continue to be very concerned about, and our party continues to raise the issue, despite the fact that we're labeled as party poopers and austerity seekers and stuff like that. It is a legitimate issue.
Norm, did you want to add to that?
Certainly, yeah. And the provincial government doesn't have the luxury of printing money. And certainly before COVID hit, the plan was to balance the budget in 2023. I would say it's safe to say that that's going to be pushed back. I spent last night with the caucus advisory team with the finance minister on it for 2.5 hours, talking about the upcoming budget in November. So there's going to be a provincial budget in November, and then there's also going to be one in March. And I think probably especially in the March one, as we get hopefully a little more certainty with COVID, there will be a plan coming forward with how we eventually get back to balance. But right now, the focus is protecting people, and the health concerns are number one, and then we'll be moving to recover and rebuild as we move forward. And I'm sure we will be coming up with a plan to get back to balance, but I expect the date for balance will be certainly pushed out. But I mean, 15 years is roughly about $350 billion, and interest on the debt, if it was a ministry, is even with historically low interest rates, is about $12 billion, or so about $1 billion a month is paid on servicing debt. As say, if that was a ministry, it'd be the third biggest ministry after health, education, and then it'd be interest on the debt. And there's a whole bunch of other ministries. So obviously, the less debt we have, the more money we have from taxes. It is certainly a concern, but at this point, the big concern is keeping Ontarians safe. And I think the economy and our health outcomes are absolutely tied. And the better we do on the health side, the better the economy is going to do.
Thank you. Let's all stay safe and kind. I appreciate so much, Norm and Scott, that you took your time today to speak to all of us. And on behalf of Dulcie Pasco from the Almaguin Highlands Chamber of Commerce, thank you again for your incredible collaboration. And we worked together on a number of initiatives and try not to, see the borders, if you will, and we'll continue to do so across Parry Sound and Muskoka and work together as a team. We've Scott and Norm both have such an incredible team behind them, as Scott alluded to, and I know Norm have worked closely with Kirsten and Jeff and Leslie, and we're very lucky to have such a great team together to work towards a positive outcome. Let's have a fabulous winter. Let's work together to come up with some really positive ways to turn this into the best thing that we can for our area. And again, I hope everyone stays healthy and safe. I don't know, Norm, if you have any closing comments.
I just want to thank you, Kelly and Ducey, for hosting this. And I will be sending out a survey in the next little while, a business survey. So just ask members to look for that to help us respond and react to COVID as well. So thank you so much, and thanks for all the great questions. And Scott, I hope you have a safe trip out in BC.
Thanks, Norm. I would echo that. Thanks to Kelly and Dulcie and the chambers and all the great work you've done in helping us set this up, and the ongoing work you do to support your members and the business community. And I reiterate again that the importance of reaching out directly to my office if there's something specific that you didn't get answered today, or if you're having some troubles with the vast bureaucracy in Ottawa, please reach out to my office. We can help where we can. And the other thing I should say too is the offices they're partially open. There's not always somebody in there all the time, but we check voicemail regularly. If you call, leave your name and number so we can call you back. There have been people who have left messages said just call me back, and they didn't leave a number, and they think we have some miraculous technology or something, but we don't. So please reach out to the office, and like you said, Kelly, let's stay safe, let's take care of each other, and let's be kind. We will get through this, and I think we'll come through it even stronger than we were before if we stick together.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for participating today, and hopefully we'll hear from you soon. We'll talk to you later. Bye for now.